and good day, everyone, and welcome to Toastmasters District 3's Lunch and Learn. My name is Lisa Raymond. I am filling in for the awesome and fabulous Colleen McNeese, your host. Today, we have a fantastic webinar in session. What I've done is pressed recording. We're going to go ahead and record this session so that way we can all learn from it a little bit later on. I am pleased today to introduce you to our host and our facilitator, Jovita Robertson. She's going to teach us her three-step method, three-step method on how to give evaluations in real life. Jovita is currently a career and leadership development coach, and she teaches women how to use their voice to advocate for themselves and advance their careers. Her program focuses on proven areas that she has refined through her coaching, as well as over 7 years managing small and large teams in various corporate settings. Seeing the lack of professional development available, especially for women, this is what drives Jovita's passion for helping others advance their careers. Jovita is currently the Vice President of Education of Leaders Plus Toastmasters, and she uses her experience and methods to help her club benefit with mentorship and effective feedback. In fact, in Toastmasters, we've had the benefit of having a safe place to make our mistakes and learn from them through that safe haven that we have and through constructive evaluations from our peers. Unfortunately, not everyone gets this opportunity with their family or friends, or even colleagues. We need a way to translate the benefits from Toastmaster level evaluations into other areas of our life. Jovita's title for her presentation today at our Lunch and Learn is How to Give Evaluations in Real Life. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome our speaker today, Jovita Robertson.
Thank you so much, Lisa. I'm very excited to be here, and I appreciate everybody for taking time on their lunch break to show up as well. I just want to confirm you can see my slides. Good. Okay. How to give evaluations in real life. Let me ask this first. Are you the counter in your life? If you don't know what an counter is, for those of us who might not be familiar with Toastmasters, in every meeting we have somebody whose job is to count and listen for our filler words, our uhs, ums, anything that we are doing that might take away from our messaging. If you do this, raise your hand, put your name in the chat if you are the counter in your real life. You might be in a work meeting listening to a colleague give a presentation and you're privately counting the number of uhs and ums. You could be listening to a toast at a wedding or at a speech at a graduation ceremony, a charity event, anywhere. You just naturally are hearing those crutch words. I bet some of you today are even going to be counting my crutch words and filler words during this presentation. I'm happy for you to tell me at the end of the session how I did. I remember the first time I went to the Phoenix Symphony, and this was pre-pandemic, of course. Before the program begins, the conductor comes out on stage and addresses the audience. I can't remember exactly what he said, but I do remember that he had dozens of ums and ahs. It was cringeworthy, like nails on a chalkboard. I was shifting uncomfortably in my seat. It felt like the longest 5 to 10 minutes. Now, of course, they went on to perform an amazing program, but I still haven't forgotten that. Imagine if I went to the conductor after such an amazing performance and found him and said, the show you had tonight was amazing. The music beautifully evoked all these different emotions. However, in the beginning, you had 45 ums. Before you present again, I recommend that you practice what you're going to say and maybe add a few more pauses. What do you think would happen? He would laugh in my face or ignore me or have me removed from the theater, never to return again. It's not normal or common to just go up to strangers and give them feedback. We tend to want to do that only with people that we have such a good rapport, but for some reason nowadays, especially with the prevalence of social media, we tend to do just that. We give feedback and evaluations to people without any regard to how effective they are. If I had done that with the conductor, do you think that he would honestly take that feedback and implement it? Probably not. Even when it's somebody that we're close with, we don't always think about how effectively we're giving them feedback or advice or our opinions. And so we need to take a look at how we can translate what we're doing in Toastmasters that's effective and bringing that into our real world examples. Today, I'm going to go over the 3-step method of giving effective evaluations and how you can use this in real life. So how do I keep saying in real life, right? Toastmasters is real life to us, but it kind of is like a fairy tale place, a utopia where things are very different. It's an environment that I have not seen anywhere else. I've been in Toastmasters for 9 years, and with my family, friends, different jobs that I've had, different organizations I've been involved with, I've never felt an environment like Toastmasters. And what's more impressive to me is that even when I am a guest, I am a visitor to a completely new club. It's not just my club where I feel this wonderful sense of utopia. I can go to a brand new club in the Pay It Forward program and really still get that same friendly, joyful, secure environment. TLI conference, all those things, you get the same experience. And so it's really amazing that we can recreate that in Toastmasters, a safety bubble, if you will, where people feel like they can be vulnerable and be open. And so we want to see how can we do that outside of Toastmasters as well. So first and foremost, I'm almost catching my own filler words as we're going along. First and foremost, how do we get that in the Toastmasters environment? And then we can talk about how we're going to translate that into the real world. So let's think about what makes Toastmasters great. It's in the evaluations. To me, that is the strength of Toastmasters. We have that quality of giving feedback. And I'm not just talking about the formal feedback where we have an actual outline of the feedback we need to give to somebody's presentation. I'm talking about all the feedback that is shared during Toastmasters, the general evaluator, the Toastmaster, the counter, the grammarian, the mentors that we work with. There's so many opportunities. I'm sure I'm forgetting some, but there are so many different ways that we give feedback in Toastmasters. And, definitely drop in the chat. If you have some that I haven't mentioned, drop in the chat. But that's what makes a good Toastmasters experience. So let's think of what makes a good evaluation in Toastmasters. They're timely. We're doing them as quickly as possible. We know from research that giving feedback immediately is the best way to do it. Other things that exemplify a Toastmasters evaluation: we have empathy, compassion, humility for where the person is in their journey. We always want to do positive reinforcement. Some people like to do the sandwich method, right? Where it's positive reinforcement and then constructive criticism, and then a little bit more positive reinforcement and encouragement. We always want to evaluate the presentation and not the person. And then we definitely like to give actionable advice. So it's not just you had 45 ums and ahs, it's what can you do differently next time to improve. To summarize all of these things that I just mentioned of what makes these Toastmaster evaluations so effective is 3 different pieces. And these are the steps. So get ready to write this down. These are the 3 steps that you want to have in every evaluation that you're giving: rapport, intent, and contribution. How has Toastmasters achieved this? How is it that I can go into every single meeting, whether it's in my club or a guest in somebody else's club? I don't know who's going to be there. How do I get that same feeling every time in a Toastmaster setting? First, with rapport. Toastmasters is able to do this through the Toastmasters promise. Every single person who joins Toastmasters commits to helping their fellow Toastmasters, to having that humility and that patience with them to really let them grow in their own time. They want to make it a safe space for people to learn and make mistakes and improve. Intent. This intent for all of us in Toastmasters is to improve our skills. That's why we joined. We always focus on how to help people improve their skills and not just them as a person. We focus, like I said, on the presentation, not the person, on the things that they might be doing with their body language or gestures or tone or vocabulary, things like that, where we are focusing on their skills and not necessarily them as a person. We would never make a person feel bad about who they are if they're not at a certain level yet. If we feel like they should be moving forward faster, we wouldn't do that, right? We give them grace. They might not get it right the first time, the second, third, fourth, or fifth time. We let people improve at their own pace and in their own path. Finally, contribution. And this is what is really helpful for anybody who's trying to develop a skill, is that actionable advice. It's not just here's a statement or an opinion of what I thought. Here's what I think will help you specifically. And it's customized to that person. We don't want to just focus on, well, this is what I do, because every person is different. Everybody learns differently and everybody has a different personality. So we do a really good job in Toastmasters of customizing the feedback to that person. All right, how are you all doing with me so far? Everybody's good? We understand how evaluations work in Toastmasters. We've identified a lot of characteristics that make Toastmasters evaluations great. And now we've summarized those into these 3 steps. Lisa, do we have any questions or comments in the chat?
I don't see any at the moment, Jovita. I think you are good to go. Everybody seems to have understood what you've said.
Perfect. Well, then we can move on, because yes, we do want to talk about how awesome Toastmasters evaluations are. It's certainly going to be helpful for anyone who's new to Toastmasters, who's looking to improve their evaluation skills. But the question we're here to answer today is, how do we take these Toastmaster level evaluations and translate them into real life? So let's talk about what evaluations in real life even look like, right? So like I said, I've been in Toastmasters for 9 years. When I joined, it was because I was looking to move ahead in my career. I wanted to get into management and leadership roles. And when you're doing that, you have to do a lot of feedback, a lot of communication, a lot of evaluation for your team to build a strong team. So what I have done is taken the things that I've learned in Toastmasters, and I have used that for all of the teams that I've managed. When I was at Drive Time, I had teams of about 50, 55 people, where I was having to constantly talk to people all the time about how they're doing, their performance, their metrics. When I moved over to VP operations at the financial company, my teams were still around like maybe 20 to 30 people. So you have a lot of opportunities in your career, especially if you're a manager, where you're having to get feedback on a regular basis. But not all feedback in real life is as formal as a manager who's talking to their employees, right? So let's think about some other examples of when you would give feedback in real life. And again, just feedback evaluations, I'm using that word interchangeably just so that you're still with me. Anytime we're giving feedback or evaluations, we're sharing our opinion or our advice or anything like that. So that could be with your employees, like I said. It could be with other colleagues when things are going on. Maybe you're working on a project together. You have situations with your spouses, right? Maybe you and your spouse are trying to get on the same page about something. Your kids, that's a perfect example. You have to do that constantly because you're trying to develop them and help them grow, right? With parents, I know that for me, with my parents, we have to kind of set boundaries and work through our relationship. friends, neighbors. I mean, anybody that you interact with, that you're building a relationship with, you're going to have opportunities where you are receiving feedback, but you're also giving them feedback. It's going to look all different shapes, different sizes. A couple that we can definitely relate to, right? Unsolicited advice from a parent. We've all had that, right? We've all had a mom try to tell us what they thought we should have done in a situation, what they think we should be doing with our lives. That's a perfect example of some feedback, right? We have probably done that to somebody else, right? We've probably given some unsolicited advice, maybe not with bad intentions, but we've done it to somebody else. We don't like it when it happens to us, but we might have done it to somebody else. Other types of feedback could be maybe some passive aggressive comments. That tends to happen with maybe spouses or colleagues who are not really wanting to directly confront a situation. So they might have some more passive aggressive feedback to you. Sometimes you might have a person who is overly aggressive, where they are just in your face. Maybe there was an issue at work or something, and there's just a aggressive personality who's coming at you with some feedback. All of these scenarios are feedback, even though you might not think of it as an evaluation, or you might not think about it as feedback in the moment. And it's typically because we're so reactionary to what's going on in the situation. The final example I want to give about evaluations in real life is social media. I can't believe how people talk to each other on social media. They're constantly sharing their opinions about what you're doing in your own life, right? Like whatever you post, somebody's going to go on there and have something to say. You have people who say positive things. You have people who say negative things. It's amazing how people are not as afraid to say what they want on social media because they're not in person. They would never say that to you in person, but people do share a lot of their opinions on social media in a completely different way, and it's ineffective, right? Imagine if we did any of those things in Toastmasters, if we were overly aggressive or passive aggressive or saying the same kind of things we see on social media. That would never fly. We would never even allow such a thing in Toastmasters. It would be a shock to people, right? So why do we do this in real life with people that we're close with without any real consideration? And again, maybe we're not doing it intentionally. Maybe we don't even realize that that's what we're doing. And so that's why I want to talk about it today. The way that you can tell if this is what you are doing to other people is by their reaction. Are they shutting down? Are they becoming defensive? Do arguments ensue when you're like, I don't understand why we're arguing? How did that become an argument, right? That wasn't my intention. We definitely need to all look in the mirror, and I'm including myself in this. Like, I am just as guilty as anybody else. We all have to look in the mirror and see, like, what are we putting out there and how can we do that differently? So now that I've made you aware of some of the errors that we could be making, even inadvertently, let's talk about how to do better and give these effective evaluations. We know that feedback is super important. Like I said, it's an amazing tool to help people grow and develop. I'm actually a feedback junkie. I love feedback all the time. As a matter of fact, anybody who has feedback to give to me on this presentation today, don't hesitate to shoot it over to me. The feedback for anybody, whether it's a friend, a parent, a child, a spouse, it doesn't matter. The feedback is important in your relationship. It's helping them grow. And you're going to do these things off the cuff, on the fly. Maybe again, if you're a big social media person, you're going to have to deal with that on social media. So let's talk about how we can do this effectively, okay? So first thing you want to look at when we're talking about the 3-step method is rapport. When you are about to give feedback, I want you to take a second and think about what is the rapport that you have with this person, whoever you're about to give the feedback to. Should you even provide the feedback to them or not? If you've ever studied conflict management or perhaps if you've read that book, Crucial Conversations, you know that the relationship is an important factor in how you're going to communicate and decide to talk to them, right? So if it's somebody that's very important to you, or the relationship going forward is really important, you want to be a little bit more careful of the feedback that you're giving to them, right? What impact does this feedback have? Maybe you don't have a really close relationship with this person and your rapport is not as strong, but the feedback has a big impact. This would be, for example, in a work setting. Maybe you have a new coworker who just started and you don't have a good relationship with them, but you notice that they're doing something and you need to give them feedback so that they can correct it and not have an issue as they're new in their new position, right? That's just an example. And then you want to think about the credibility, trust, and safety. That is a huge part of, again, why the Toastmaster evaluations are so effective. So how are you creating that credibility, that safety for the recipient of your feedback? Again, if it's somebody that you don't know that well, maybe you don't have a history of rapport where you already have that trust built up. So you need to do it on the fly. And that's going to definitely come across in how you approach the situation when you're giving feedback. The next is the intent. So we've definitely all experienced where something that we've said has been misinterpreted or blown out of proportion. And a lot of that has to do with how we are communicating and approaching the situation. So as Toastmasters, we are very experienced with communication, but for everybody else, you want to think about your verbals and your non-verbals. So how is the message resonating when you say it in a certain tone, when you use certain eye contact, body language? Those things are going to help the recipient not to misinterpret what you're saying. It also helps if you understand EQ a little bit, that's emotional intelligence, because you can be aware and observe the person's response and see, like, is this making sense? Are they understanding what I'm saying, or do I need to reword or rephrase what's happening, right? So you want to make sure that you're being as crystal clear as you can, because you want them to believe, and you should obviously want to feel this way too, but you want them to believe that you are genuinely trying to help them. Whatever feedback you're providing, whatever advice you're giving them, should be coming from a place of genuinely trying to help them. And you do also want to make sure that you're not pushing them too hard and that you're allowing them to grow at their own pace. So this is one where I'm very guilty. I'm very guilty of this with my sisters. And it's probably because I do know them so well, right? Like, I've known them my whole life. And so we have such a huge history, and I know that their potential. So when my sister will tell me a story about something that's going on at work, it's like I want to just overload them with, like, do this and this and this, and give all this advice and tell them what I think they should do. And I have to actually consciously stop myself, because again, it's not about what I would do or the pace at which I think they should be trying to improve. I have to let my sister, improve at her own pace. So I have to really just let her work through things in her own time and not try to push and push and push, right, when I'm giving any feedback or advice. And then finally, with the contribution, think about, what is that value that I'm adding to this person? If I'm going to give this feedback, whether we have a strong rapport or not, I've got my intent in mind, but what is my value add? Just because I have good intentions doesn't mean I'm adding any value, right? Like, you're adding value by giving that actionable advice, something that they can tangibly take away and do. And you can only do that truly effectively if you're actively listening, right? So you can't be the person who's like started listening to their story and you've already come up with a response in your head before they've even finished. That's not going to work. You have to actively listen to their problem and actually really hear, are they just venting? Do they actually need advice? Like, what is the real issue that they're presenting to you? And then you can give them some actual feedback or advice to move forward. And then remember, you want to customize it to them. You don't want it to be just what you would do in that situation. And that's a lot of times what we do when we give advice is like, well, this is what I would do. And that's not necessarily as effective because everybody's different. They're not you. You're not in that situation. So like a simple example to help illustrate this point is movie recommendations, right? I have certain movies that I like, but you might have different movies that you like. My friend Eric is very good at doing this. He knows that I don't like certain sci-fi type movies. So even though he really likes that, he'll say, you know what, I really like this, but I wouldn't recommend it for you, right? And that's the same thing we need to do with our advice, is just because it's something that worked for me or that I can get value out of, doesn't mean that it's the same for the other person. And we really want to think about that. Okay, so here are some things to help you out. I know that's a lot of information and it might seem challenging, but I really want you to shift your mindset in this way to think of, how am I doing these evaluations in real life? Now, I will say that, yes, I am aware that most feedback that we're having is happening on the fly, right? We don't have a controlled environment like we do in Toastmasters. In Toastmasters, we have a set agenda of when the feedback is going to happen. It's on a schedule, it's controlled, and most people know that the feedback is coming. We pretty much tell everybody right away, like, hey, we're going to ask for feedback. We're going to give feedback. If a person is new to Toastmasters, they've probably come as a guest and they've actually seen the feedback, what it looks like beforehand. And that's not the same thing in real life, right? Like, we don't have a social contract with everybody in real life that says, this is how I'm going to give you feedback, and this is when you're going to get the feedback. Also in Toastmasters, people who are not yet ready, maybe they don't want to give an icebreaker, maybe they don't want to do a functionary role yet because they're not ready to get that feedback. That's okay. We don't try to push them into that. But in the real world, you can't say, I'm not participating in life today. I'm not participating at work. I'm not participating with my family. You don't have that option, right? Like, so that's why it's so important that we implement this stuff into our real world, because we don't have that same controlled environment, but we want to strive to create it. So even though it might seem like a lot of work, I promise you that just thinking through the rapport, the intent, and the contribution is going to take only a matter of minutes. And the more habitual that you make it, it's going to happen in less than a minute, right? So again, I've been actually doing this for the past 9 years since I've been in Toastmasters, since I've been a manager with my coaching clients. I do this on a pretty regular basis. I'm not perfect, right? I still make mistakes. I still react to things, but I know how to come back and like recover from those things. So I have a couple of examples that I want to share with you from my real life. So dating is the perfect example of, you might not have rapport with this person, right? If I'm going on a first date, or maybe we've been on a few dates, but we just don't have that history yet. Maybe I want to, maybe the goal in terms of the importance of the relationship is I want to get to that point, right? We're just trying to get to know each other. But in order to get to know each other, sometimes we do have to share a little bit about, like, if something that I'm doing or that the other person is doing is making me uncomfortable or what have you, right? So we do have to be careful. I have to make sure that my messaging is clear, that my nonverbals are on point, so that I'm not making the other person defensive or think negatively of me in some way. Now, let's say that the date was a complete jerk. Like, let's just say that this is a person who's not as important, right? Like, maybe it was a terrible date and I don't have any interest in ever going out with this person again, right? So I don't have the rapport. So let's look at the test, right? I don't have the rapport. My intent is probably not really good in terms of, like, I genuinely want to give you feedback to help you. It's more of like, I just want to tell you off because you're a jerk, right? But how is that really, like, that's not a positive or effective thing to do, right? And then I can't say that I'm really adding value, because it's not like I'm going to follow up on a second date or third date to see if he implemented my feedback. So this would be a situation where you probably just, I need to let it go. Like, he doesn't care that he was a jerk, and maybe he was a jerk to me because he had a bad day. Who knows, right? But this would be a time where maybe I don't have to give any feedback in this situation, because I'm not passing the test for rapport, for intent, and for contribution. Right? So even though in my mind, I might be like, yes, I'm going to tell him because I want the satisfaction of telling him, that's not a genuine intent. And it's really not helpful for the other person. But again, if it was somebody that I actually did want to see again and I needed to tell them something important, I would find a way to approach and craft that message so that they understood I was coming from a genuine place, and that I would give them actual advice so that they can maybe not do that thing again in the future. Okay, second example, a colleague, right? We all have colleagues. We don't always get along with them. And so we need to find ways to communicate and give feedback to them. This is very important because you have different levels of rapport with different colleagues, but usually there's a lot of impact. So because you might be working on different projects, or you have different deadlines or metrics, or they can impact your career in some way. So it is really important that we are effective when we're giving feedback or evaluations to our colleagues. I had a friend who was working with a sales manager. She was in operations. He was a sales manager, and he unfortunately was just very difficult to work with. She tried a lot of different things and tried to build rapport with him, but he just really wasn't going for it. So she wanted to give him some feedback, and she was asking me how to do that. And unfortunately, at that point, because she had already made a decision to leave, she was mostly like, I just want to give this feedback on the way out so they know this is kind of why I left. And so to me, I'm like, okay, well, your intent there is maybe not genuine, right? Like that's again a situation where it's like you want to feel validated as the person giving feedback, like you want to feel validated or justified, and it's not really genuine to the receiver of the feedback. And then again, with the contribution in terms of what can they do to improve, if you're only saying like, hey, I don't like how you treated me, but you don't have anything else to tell them, that's not really helpful. It's probably not going to be implemented. They're probably not going to be very receptive to that feedback, right? So that's a situation where you might not want to do that. On the flip side, I actually had a sales manager. What's up with these sales managers? I had a sales manager myself I had a very similar issue many years ago. He and I kind of got off to a rocky start, and we sat down and had a conversation to just talk through, like, we have differences of opinion, that's going to happen. But what I really tried to do was actively listen to what he was saying that I was doing that caused some issues. I was able to be careful in how I was communicating back to him so that there wasn't any misinterpretation, and we didn't have to keep going back and forth, right? It wasn't this constant back and forth. It was just slowing down, listening, letting him say his piece, making sure what I was saying to him was very, very clear, and then customized again to how I could work with him to address his specific needs, and we can both work together going forward, right? So colleagues are definitely a key group of people to give effective evaluations to. And then my final example are friends, right? We have tons of friends who want to hear from us, who want to get feedback on their relationships, on situations that are happening at work or with their family, right? So we have a lot of opportunities with our friends to implement this 3-step method, okay? So think about it as like these relationships are really important, right? We do genuinely want them to be happy, right? So we're wanting to give them advice, but again, we have to make sure that advice is catered to them, not just on what we would do in that relationship or with that work problem, right? It has to be catered to their personality style. If I'm a person who is more direct, I wouldn't tell my friend who's more introverted to go be direct, right? Like she would never do that. That's not her personality, and that's not advice that's going to really help her. Plus, sometimes friends just want to vent, right? Like we all have had that where it's like they don't maybe want advice. This is where we kind of give that unsolicited advice. Maybe they just wanted to vent, and they don't really need us to tell them what to do, or not yet. Maybe they were just getting that off their chest, and later they will come back and ask. So this is where that listening, active listening, is going to be really key to make sure that you're in tune to what your friend is actually needing and asking you as well, so that you don't end up constantly giving them advice they're not looking for. And then what ends up happening is, like, if you're constantly giving advice that they're not looking for and they're not implemented, you start to get frustrated, right? You're like, oh, they keep complaining about the same thing all the time and I don't want to hear it anymore. Well, maybe it's not that they're doing that entirely, maybe you're not also listening enough to what's really going on, and are not giving advice that's customized to them. You're just telling them what you think that you would have done in that situation. So perfect example, my friend that I just mentioned who had an issue with her sales manager, I had a similar issue. I did not tell her to go do exactly what I did when I handled that situation with my sales manager, because I know that that wasn't what was going to be valuable to her when she was bringing the situation to me and actually asking me what she thought she should do. So I didn't just jump and be like, you know what, let me tell you the story of what I did and how I handled the situation, because I don't think that was sensitive to her needs. And again, not useful in her situation. My actual advice for her, because of the intent, like I said, that she had and the lack of contribution, was to do nothing. I was like, it's not going to make you look better to go say this or do this to him. And you never want to burn bridges when you leave a job. Even if it's a job you didn't like, you never know where these people are going to come back into your life, right? So for me, in that case, the advice I gave her was not to do anything at all. Okay. I know it's been a ton of information, right? I've given you all the steps of how Toastmasters evaluations work, a lot of scenarios of how this evaluations work in real life, and then now examples of how you can actually go out and take these Toastmaster level evaluations and translate them into real life. But I have one more amazing nugget that I want you to take with you. This is the cherry on the cake of how you can become an even better evaluator. It's going to help you build rapport quickly and connect with people. It's going to always make sure that you have the best intent in mind when you're giving feedback. And it's how you're going to always make sure your feedback is contributing and adding values to others. Are you ready? Okay. Being receptive to feedback. This is the key to enhance your evaluation skills. When you are receptive to feedback, the feedback you get from other people, this is the game changer. So, one piece of clarification, just because you're receptive to feedback doesn't mean you agree with the feedback. Okay. I will clarify that even more in a second. Being receptive to feedback and agreeing with the feedback, two different things. Okay. But being receptive means that you are managing your reactions of what somebody is telling you. Remember, an evaluation is it's opinion, it's a perception, it's their advice, right? It doesn't necessarily mean that it is right or you agree with it, but you need to be receptive. And so that means not rolling your eyes. That means listening to them and not getting distracted and being on the phone. That means not trying to argue with them, right? Like that's one thing, especially in a work environment where I've seen is like if I'm giving feedback to an employee and they try to argue with me, it's like you can't argue an opinion that's already been formed. You can't. Like, I don't care what anybody tells you, the opinion has already been formed. All that you can do is maybe, sure, explain your case in a professional and appropriate manner, and then I will pay attention more next time to see if that is in fact true. But you can't change an opinion that has already been shaped or formed. You can't do it. So arguing it only makes you look worse, right? So managing your reaction when somebody is giving you feedback is very, very important. The other thing that's important is making sure you're asking for clarification. Okay, maybe you don't understand the feedback that they're giving you. This is probably something spouses can relate to a lot, right? You're talking to the husband of, hey, I wanted you to do this and you didn't do it. And the husband is like, but what are you talking about? I did do it. And then you get the back and forth. And it's usually because we're not asking the clarifying questions of what did you actually mean? Like, I would love it if everybody in the world was a fabulous communicator and could always say exactly what they mean, but that's not how the world works. So we have to, knowing that, make sure that we're asking clarifying questions to get the real intent of the person's message, okay? And then finally, you want to make a decision. And what I mean by that is, are you going to implement the feedback or not? So this is where I was saying you don't have to always agree with the feedback. Sometimes you aren't going to agree with the feedback, especially if it doesn't follow our 3-pronged test, right? What is the rapport, the credibility, the trust with the person who's given you the feedback? What is their intent? And then what is their contribution? Is it actually feedback that's adding value to you or not? And if it doesn't pass the test, you don't have to implement the feedback. You were receptive to it. You listened to them, maybe even said, thanks for the feedback, I'll think about it. But you don't have to actually go and make a change if you don't believe that that feedback applies to you. Okay. So implementing this practice as well as your 3-pronged test, when you implement being receptive to feedback as well, you're just going to start to notice these things when you're giving feedback more. So that's why this is like the cherry on the cake, the enhancement that's going to make you an even better evaluator. You definitely want to think about how you're being receptive to feedback and then use that when you give feedback to others. The challenge I have for each and every one of you is to just think about what you're doing, what you're putting out there into the world. How are you sharing your opinion? How are you giving advice to your family, your friends, your colleagues in real life? Think about what you do in Toastmasters and how can you bring that into your real world environments. That feeling of safety, that patience, that grace that we give people to make mistakes over and over and over again, the encouragement to keep going so that they don't get discouraged, right? Like, how can you think like a Toastmaster in your real life situations, right? Maybe you can start trying to set up some social contracts with the people in your life of how you guys are going to communicate and share with each other. I challenge you to also implement this test, rapport, intent, and contribution. Anytime you're giving feedback, whether that's in a Toastmaster meeting or outside a Toastmaster meeting, sometimes you just have to let things go and maybe it's not the time for you to share your feedback or your opinion because it just doesn't pass the test. And then be more receptive to feedback. It's really going to make you better at giving evaluations, but it's also going to help you build that rapport with people more quickly. People want to see you be vulnerable. People are going to be more receptive to hearing your feedback when you are receptive to theirs. If you're constantly arguing anytime they give you feedback, but then you expect them to take your feedback, that's not going to work, right? You have to have a reciprocal feedback relationship. The moral of the story is if you're always focused on building connections with people, if your intent is genuine and you're providing positive contributions, then it doesn't matter what the situation is, whether it's in Toastmasters, whether it's a conversation on the fly or some troll on social media. When you are always thinking in that mindset, looking in the mirror and seeing, are you doing those things at all time, then you will always give effective evaluations in real life. I hope you all got a lot of value out of today's presentation. You definitely have a 3-step method going forward. We talked about, like I said, how to use it in Toastmasters. So if you are a Toastmaster, go back and incorporate it into your meetings, go use it and try it out. Definitely try it on your friends and family or anybody else. And yeah, definitely share some feedback with me in the chat. I would be happy to hear how many ums and ahs I had or any filler words that I use that I need to take out of my vocabulary.
Jovita, this was fantastic. Thank you. Comments I'm seeing, you're providing such wonderful wisdom. Got another one. Awesome job, Jovita. Congratulations. Love the tips on evaluation and nice tips. Excellent tips, rather, Jovita. So everybody's loving what you did. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thanks, Lisa. Thanks, District 3, for putting on this great event.
Oh, you're welcome. Another comment, such good presentation. Thank you so much. Very informative. If you have any questions for Jovita, please drop them either in the chat or use the Q&A. We'll hang on for just a few minutes. And if you want to, you can take a picture of this screen that Jovita has up of her contact information, her website, or if you want to go check out that Toastmasters Club she's a member of, that's on the screen. I've also put it in the chat for you so you can copy paste it. One question I'd have is how do we control these impulses, especially with the immediacy, Jovita, of social media? of being able to stream things at your own pace. Everything is on our demand type of cycle. So how do we stop this feeling of, oh, I've got to do it now, with so much at force that we can really capture and that really almost suffocates us in our daily lives?
That is an excellent question. I feel like for me, what works, so again, because I don't know you, I have to try to give you an example of my real life example, the emotional intelligence factor. So if you don't know what emotional intelligence is, it focuses on self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, and relationship management. So I am a person who is very impatient. That is who I am. So I have to catch myself from reacting or from doing something because of my impatience, but I am very self-aware of it and I know how to manage it. So one thing that I do, so let's say that I have a situation where somebody's given me feedback and maybe they expect me to respond in that moment. I am not good at that. I don't want to respond in the moment, right? So what I will say to them is like, hey, thank you for that feedback. I actually would like to think about that a little bit more. Can I get back with you? Can I loop back with you, right? So that could be a colleague, a boss, a friend or family member. If you're getting some feedback that you don't agree with or you don't know how to handle or you don't know what to say, you don't have to respond in that moment. It's okay to say, I'm going to need a minute to think about this. There's nothing wrong with saying that. It might feel a little uncomfortable, but it's okay to say, hey, I'm going to need a second and I will regroup with you. Now on social media, that's more of a discipline, social media discipline of not paying attention to some of the negative things. I tend to, if I have somebody who's just being too negative on social media, I unfollow them, I unfriend them. Like, I don't want that negative energy in my life. It can be difficult because it might be people that you're close with. You know, I think that during the pandemic, I cut a lot of people out because I needed to set boundaries of the type of things that I was seeing on my social media or the things they're talking about, right? So I think that with social media has to be a little bit more of a discipline because you don't have to respond right away, right? You can literally walk away. The person is not in your face. It's your choice of when you are responding. And also, if it's hard for you to stop yourself from responding, then you just need to keep those people off of your feed. You need to remove them. But in an in-person situation or on the phone even or Zoom, just say, hey, I need a minute. I need some time to get back to you on this.
That makes sense. And then for my edification, is emotional intelligence the same thing as EQ that I've heard about? And I think I have a book on it too.
Correct. Yes, it is. It is the same thing. So when they say EQ, it's supposed to be like IQ, like your emotional score. The good thing about EQ is that it can be developed. It's a skill that can be developed, right? And IQ is not really something that you can change, the range of your IQ, but emotional intelligence 100% can be changed. I never even heard of emotional intelligence back in, I want to say it was like 2012 is the first time I even heard of it. And I definitely lacked self-awareness and self-management skills. But the more that I improved on those, I actually think, yes, I do. I have this book right here, Emotional Intelligence 2.0, and it actually includes a ton of like tips and skills to help you improve. Journaling is the one that I use the most. If I get upset about something, or like I said, if somebody's asking me for something, I need to think it through, I'll just write it out. Like, I just need to write out my thoughts. And then that way, when I go back to them, I've kind of already done the brainstorming and I can go back and have a proper, professional, intelligent conversation with them.
That's terrific. I have that book too. It was recommended to me by a mentor team prior to me coming into Toastmasters, but it is really, really good to read.
Yes.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. Are there any other questions from anyone else that you can put them again in the chat or drop them in the Q&A session part of this? Can you please put the book and author in the chat? Absolutely.
Yes, let me do that.
Oh, hang on, I think she muted her. Jovita, I think you muted yourself on accident. Part of technology.
I set the book down on the mute button. So it's Travis, but I don't know if I put this in here, can you paste it into the...
Certainly.
Okay, because I was like, it doesn't look like I can, but it's Travis Bradbury and Jean Greaves, and it's called Emotional Intelligence 2.0. The reason that this book is also really helpful is because, and I'll put it up here too, is because it comes with an assessment. If you get, so make sure you get the actual book from the actual author, because if you get one that's used or whatever, you won't get the assessment. And the assessment is like one of the best parts. So the assessment that you take in the beginning is going to tell you how well you do based on how you answer the questions with your self-awareness, your self-management, social awareness, and relationship management. And it'll kind of give you specific advice to what your score is. And so that's just a way to kind of help and get started. But again, even if you get a used one, you can get a lot of tips from here on how to just improve in those areas. You just might not know which area to start with if you don't do the assessment.
I may be speaking out of turn, but I think if they were to go to the website or even Googling this, if they did pick up a book that didn't have the assessment, I think it's on the website for these authors, or at least one of them.
I know that I don't know if you can do it for free. I know that when you go to the website, they have you put in the key. It's kind of like a Microsoft key. When you buy it, they want to make sure that you paid for it. So you have to put in a key to do the assessment. They probably do have a way to maybe buy a key if you needed one. So I'm sure that they would have monetized it some way.
Right. I would have definitely. Now, is this an assessment? Because I took it a while back. I don't remember how well I did. I probably should retake it myself, but is this in a test where we should sit down, just do rapid fire answers, or can we actually think about, or would that be applying overthinking to the situation for the assessment?
I would probably say a little bit of overthinking, which I'm very guilty of myself. It's a longer assessment. I want to say it's like 30 minutes, but okay. I feel like you're going to want to try to answer the questions with your first thought, because when we tend to overthink, it's like you might change your answers, right? And the purpose of the assessment isn't to judge you. It isn't to, you can disagree with your assessment, but the idea is just to open your eyes to things that maybe were a blind spot for you. That for me, like the self-awareness part was a huge blind spot for me. My score was a lot lower than what I thought it would. And the assessment gave a lot of specifics of like why you're not maybe as good with self-awareness as you think you are. So once I started practicing the techniques, I was like, man, I really am not as good as this, but now much better. Like I said, you can definitely develop an emotional intelligence skill. If you ask my family and friends, they will tell you I talk about it a lot because I definitely think that it helps us in connecting and building rapport with people.
Terrific. Thank you very much. I appreciate you clarifying all that.
Yeah.
All right, we'll go back to our guests in the room. Does anyone attending today have any further questions about this? We've got about 8 minutes left, so absolutely we can pepper Jovita with a lot of questions today about EQ and about the slide presentation that she gave us today, which was awesome. I imagine that with the contact information we have on the screen, and I did put it in the chat, can they contact you if they want a copy or a PDF of the presentation or no?
Oh, absolutely. Yes, absolutely.
Yep. And there's a question, do we get copies?
I'm happy to send it over, or if you think of other questions afterwards, don't hesitate to reach out to me.
And a copy of the video. Our video today will be available on our YouTube channel for Toastmasters District 3 under the playlist Lunch and Learn. So absolutely go to that playlist. We should have it available. I'm hoping, because I don't know what Don Griffith's schedule is for editing. I'm hoping by Tuesday, no later than Friday, I would think next week. So it should be done by Easter. I can have a thumbs up for that. Terrific. All right. Any last thoughts, ladies and gentlemen? If not, I can give you 7 minutes back of your time. Jovita, this was fantastic. I really learned a lot today. Thank you. And I look forward to seeing you at another presentation. I'm going to stop our recording right now. Ladies, thank you. And Jovita, thank you very much. This was fantastic.